Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Today y Mañana. I'm Alex. This is Xavier. We're very excited to have you joining us this morning. It is definitely, with a little chill in the air, a little cloudiness, it is definitely a morning to get into your nice, cozy space, grab you a little café con leche or whatever makes you nice and warm inside, and sit down for a wonderful show of Today y Mañana, as we'll be joined with some fantastic guests this morning.
Absolutely. Cozy space. You say that, I can just see Mom putting on her robe, that fluffy robe. It's like, oh yeah, wait a minute, that's a cozy space right here.
The fluffy robe, absolutely. So if you have that fluffy robe, even if you're at the office, if you're at your office and you go put on the fluffy robe and enjoy some Today
right over
y
that
Mañana.
suit.
You can say that right over that suit. You can say that Alex from Today y Mañana told you to put on
It was
the
okay.
fluffy robe.
You get permission.
That it's okay to pamper yourself a little bit on a cold morning like this. So we're going to be joined shortly, really excited, by Martha Bourlakas. She's the owner of Storied Goods, a small business here in Central Virginia, as well as followed by Tom Chapman. He's the executive director of the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society. So two great guests.
Absolutely.
That are going to be joining us this morning. As always, we love being here on the I Love CVille Network set. We are presented by Emergent Financial Services. We are powered by Castle Hill Cider, which, do not forget, the 231 Fest is coming up
May 15th.
this Sunday. I mean, I don't even have to say the number anymore because it's so close.
Sunday, that's right.
This Sunday, beginning at noon, 11 a.m. if you're a VIP ticket, but beginning at noon, the 231 Fest, Castle Hill Cider, some great local food there. I know the Andre Xavier and Patch Brewery part of that. So just so much wonderful stuff going on. Of course, benefiting Blue Ridge Area Food Bank.
That's right.
So
exactly.
a great cause as well. So be sure to check that out. You can find it on Castle Hill Cider's website. And I think it's castlehillcider.com/231.
There you are. Easy.
So very easy to find, of course. And of course, we're always powered by Aqua CVille Hand Car Wash, by the Gym CVille, by our friends at Vitae Spirits, by Miguel and Chit from Sirius Craddock Insurance, by Johan Torres from GBS Financial Services, and we're always partnering with Forward Adelante, the premier Latino networking group here in Charlottesville, Virginia. So I don't know about you. I mean, I think we already have some people watching the show this morning. Oh, thank you, Jerry Miller. Jerry Miller's watching the show this morning. He may not be in studio, but he is watching the show. Elizabeth Miller watching the show this morning. Thank you, Elizabeth, for joining us this morning. So I don't know about you. I say we just jump right into it. I'm very excited for this one.
I can't wait to hear about Storied Goods.
Really? Same here. So we're really excited to welcome to the show Martha Bourlakas. She is the owner of Storied Goods. Martha, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
So happy to be here. This is great.
It is a pleasure to have you here. So for those who don't know you or know about you, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started Storied Goods.
Okay, I am based in Roanoke, and I have always, my favorite cocktail of all times is the champagne cocktail. And so sugar cube, a little bit of bitters, and then a nice champagne. It just elevates the experience of the champagne cocktail. So I started experimenting with this idea when I was 50. And so I loved the idea of the sugar cube. I thought it was a little bit nostalgic.
That's right.
And something kind of romantic about it. I grew up at the foot of the Smoky Mountains. Wow. So I love people's stories and stories around food and drink. And I wanted to honor that some way. So I started experimenting, and the first cube I did was the rose petal cube. So I started infusing the sugar cube with rose petals. Oh. And so this is our tin, and so when the champagne, the bubbles kind of dissolve the sugar cube, then the rose petals float to the surface. They're edible, they're organic, and it makes just a really lovely experience. Also, it's wonderful in tea, in hot white tea or green tea. It's wonderful. And so I started giving these as gifts, and then it just started growing. I decided to turn it into a business. And a wonderful Charlottesville designer, Watermark, did our logo and our tins and our packaging, and we absolutely love it. It's very true to the spirit of Storied Goods. And won a Best of Virginia. And after that, we were kind of off. My husband is a whiskey drinker, so I did the orange zest. This is an orange zest.
Wow, look at that.
And tart cherry juice. So it's like an instant old-fashioned. And you can just put it in.
What could go wrong with an old-fashioned?
So you can put it in bourbon. You can also do this one in tea. Also, the dry cider that you were just talking about is wonderful with these. And the nice thing is they're shelf stable. There's no syrup. You don't have to keep it refrigerated.
Right.
You just pop one in. It's less than a teaspoon of sugar, so you kind of know how much you're getting. And you were just talking about coffee and tea cozy. So our third one is the cinnamon vanilla. And so this one is made for coffee cocktails. So you can see what that one's like. And it's very, very cozy and adds just a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of clove. And so we have this business has just taken off. We do wholesale, we do retail, and in stores in California and all across the country. And it's just been a great experience. We just love we do lots of pop-up events where we talk about what it's like to elevate an experience. Our hashtag is Savor and Celebrate because we really believe that small moments deserve and need to be celebrated.
Absolutely, yes.
It's a hard world, as we know sometimes, and to find these really small moments.
See, I see the only problem with this is that they would never reach a drink because I go home and just put one in my tongue because I suspect that they dissolve in the tongue too, right?
Yes, you can absolutely do that.
Because you talk about nostalgia, right? And so I remember as a little boy that's how sugar came, remember? And you just put one in your coffee, right? Or milk or whatever you were having. And undoubtedly one will go into my mouth.
Yes, yes. And I've heard people tell stories. I had a rabbi tell me that it was a treat in school. If you got a lesson right, you got a sugar cubes, So, so there is a lot of nostalgia, and I feel like a lot of joy.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely.
I'm very curious, how do you create them? I'm
I was
curious the process of
too.
how you actually make an infused sugar cube.
Okay, that's my big secret, and then I would have to do something crazy. It is a process of food processing sugar and then mixing it with the liquid. And I have special molds. It's almost like making a candy. I mean, it is making a candy, and then I bake it in these molds. And,
okay.
Yeah.
So you actually buy the sugar and then infuse it with the flavors that you want, right?
Right.
And then put it in, I guess, into a mold and then bake it.
And we have a new cube coming out within the next few months that is lavender lemon. And so that one can be used in tea and used in gin. And
gin.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
People can definitely be looking forward to that.
I got to try that orange one on the champagne. I mean, that's got to be, because I love
that.
Orange,
Has to be good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Has to be good.
Yes.
Like a little Prosecco or something.
Yeah, a little Prosecco. It's lovely.
Very much so. So I'm curious, what are some of the things, like the events or occasions that your customers have said, hey, I was able to use your sugar cubes for this event?
Yeah, we do a lot of wedding events. At like a bridal luncheon or brunch, these really kind of elevate an experience. At bars, at weddings, when people create a signature cocktail, a signature old fashioned, they're great to use. These are used in gift baskets and gift bags, corporate gifts. We do a lot of that. All kinds of distilleries are selling these wholesale, and so they'll be in the tasting rooms of distilleries. We have a lot in Virginia and one in New York where these are used, and so it's just fun to create a signature drink. We've worked with several bartenders who have come up with drinks using the
Involving the
cubes.
cubes,
And yeah, so there are all kinds of great partnerships that we do. And it's great fun.
Even like wedding favors, right? Put one of those into
Yes.
a little box or something, and they take it home and they try it. I mean, that's got to be fabulous.
It is. They make lovely gifts, especially paired with, a nice bottle of Prosecco
Right.
or a bag of coffee or a nice tin of tea.
Yes.
They do really well.
I can imagine like a little gift basket that
Yeah.
incorporates several of those items and then one of these to sort of take it to that next level.
It does. It takes it to the next level. That's right. That's what we hope.
Are these three flavors you have now, or
These are.
okay?
Yes.
Are there others? Have you had others and then kind of
No,
discontinued?
these are our sort of signature
Okay.
3 flavors, and then the lavender lemon will come soon. And then we're partnering with several cocktail companies. We're working on some. What's coming next? So
Super.
Yeah.
Wow,
That's fantastic.
And how long have you been in business?
I started the business in 2018.
Okay.
And I was, for years, our oldest daughter was diagnosed with autism when she was young. And so she needed a lot of therapy, a lot of work. So for all these years, I've stayed with her and done this work. But that informed sort of this idea of celebration and celebrating small steps. For her and for our family, every single milestone has been significant.
Right.
And so I really wanted to figure out a way to carry that into the world. And now that Hannah's working and happy, I have a moment to play with this, which has been great.
That really is fantastic. A little thank you, Nicholas Urpí, for watching the show today. Thank you, Rosalia Tordaro, for watching the show this morning. So one thing I'm curious. So I know you mentioned a couple awards. So what kind of awards have you won already at this point for your cubes?
We have won a Best of Virginia from Virginia Living Magazine in 2018. Actually, when I started this company, I started with granola. And granola was great and won a Good Food Award in San Francisco for that. The granola market is pretty saturated, and these started taking off. So I just focus on those, and so we're in lots of competitions and excited about what comes next.
I mean, I have to admit, I mean, I don't see, in other words, you're right, granola, you go to a store and it's like 3 shelves of granola, you don't know which one to look at, they're all kinds of specials, True. But you go to sugar, I've never seen this.
Me neither.
Just few bags of, that to me is a great idea, because it's true. I mean, just take that little, I mean, the idea of the cinnamon and you put it into your coffee or tea or something like that, or obviously,
well, especially if you like tea and coffee as a vehicle for sugar.
Yeah.
Now coffee can be a vehicle for the sugar.
There you go. I love your thinking. That's great. Yes, thank you so much. It's great fun. It is.
You know what? My grandmother used to do so. Talk about memory. So when I used to live in Spain, when I'd come home from school, they used to have those cubes, and she'd take one of 2 things, either a little bit of olive oil, right, if you wanted that, or a little bit of wine. I chose the wine all the time because it had a better flavor, in my opinion, right? But she put 2 drops of literally wine into the cube and you'd snap it into the mouth. It was delicious.
Really?
Something to think about.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about that. That's
interesting. So I'm saying it's like, that's how they had sugar. I mean, it was kind of like, you came home and you did something, and instead of a candy, this is what they had for you, and you just try to put something onto that sugar to give it some flavor.
That is so interesting.
Yeah,
Thank
it was
you for
great.
sharing that
it was
story.
great.
Like
I said, it brings back memories. I'm saying, I'm looking at this. It's like boom, they're all hitting me.
Good. That's good. Yes.
So I'm curious because I know, I'm curious about like what it felt like for you to go from something you made and you were sort of giving to people as gifts, and so to sort of the ins and outs of doing it as a small business. Like, because I know we have a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs that'll watch the show, and and I'm just curious what your experience has been from the small business, from like the entrepreneur side.
This has been such an incredible experience on so many levels, and I have such a great team, a financial person who works with me, and now we have started working on co-packing. So I have gotten to the point where I can no longer make the cubes myself because I can't fill all the orders.
Wow.
And so we're moving to a co-packer in New York.
Wow.
And even that journey in and of itself has been amazing to negotiate and to stay true to the product and profit margins and cost of goods sold, and all those are things I never knew. I never talked about. I hated math growing up. I was an English major. So for me, all those ideas and concepts were so scary in the beginning, and now with my team and with these many spirit guides, I call them, these people who lift me up, it has just been fascinating. I absolutely love it. I can't imagine. There are nights when my husband and I are late at night packing tins and we're like, is this really what and there's still, even that part of it is just, it's a gift. It really is, to be able to do something you love.
That's fine.
Out of curiosity, I just so when you first start, do you kind of mix like in the one for cinnamon, right? So you put cinnamon, put it, and then taste it, see how you like it, and then how other people like it, and then get that formula down, and then how does that translate in small batch to a larger batch?
That's such a good question. Yes, because formulas, and if you're a math person, you know all about this. So initially I tasted it, and then friends and family. And that was sort of how I got I've always had small baking businesses along the way. And so I sort of knew some about what I wanted it to be like. Had people test, had friends, family comments. We did blind tastings. The whiskey one was probably the most fun for that, I have to say.
I wonder why.
Yeah. So then I got it right. And then with my co-packing consultant, she helped me figure it all into a formula. And so then when you get the percentages of the formula, you can go whatever scale you want.
Gotcha. Okay.
And still, there are still things you have to navigate. This is a candy, so different humidity levels will make a difference.
Sure.
So there's always adjusting, but it's basically a formula.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the first time I've loved a formula in my life.
There you go.
Yeah.
A baking formula.
Yes,
A baking
exactly.
Formula.
That's right.
Those are a little tastier than your usual mathematical
Nothing like the
formula.
proper ratio for that, right?
Exactly. That's right.
Absolutely. We got Ann Dershevsky watching the show this morning. Thank you, Ann. We got Bill McChesney watching this morning. Thank you, Bill, for watching the show this morning. So I love the idea that you mentioned that it's a gift, because I think a lot of people, we've talked on the show about just the challenge that is entrepreneurship, because you have to, when you start the small business, you have to deal with those things that are not directly related to what they don't go into the making of the sugar cube, but the cost of goods sold, the profit margin, the packing, the things that are sort of behind the scenes that so many entrepreneurs have to do as well. And the idea that too, because it's helping you do what you love, to be a gift, I think is a great sort of sentiment. Like, these things, they're not the most fun, they involve the math, right? But they enable you to continue doing what you love to do.
That's true. That is so true. And you have to be a risk taker. When you look at your payroll, or you look at your the cost of ordering tins, you have to think to yourself, it's so scary, I don't know if I can make this happen. And you do, but holding that perspective of it is all a gift to be able to meet people and sit here with you all and discuss it all, that's the important That's the important stuff about all of it.
Absolutely.
And it does make it worth it, so.
Couldn't have said it better. Couldn't have said it
Absolutely.
And then
better.
when you
It is.
hear of people who, contact you and say, I just had the best time at my, champagne brunch or whatever, it does make it worth it.
Yeah, they give you some of the stories that go into
It's true. And we collect those stories and we want to hear from people all the time on DMs and in the comments of our Instagram. Tell us your stories. What happened when you were sharing a coffee and you brought these cubes and started talking about your grandmother? What were those? What were those stories?
Right.
That's what we love. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, before I let you know, where anything new coming down the pipeline? I know you mentioned a potential new sugar cube, and where can people find you?
We'll have the Lavender Lemon will come out in the next few months, and people can find us. We're on Instagram at Storied_goods, and then our website is storied-goods.com. A little different. We're also on Facebook, but we mainly hang out on Instagram, and would love to see you on our website. And we love to hear from people. We really do.
Absolutely. So that's where you can.
It's a great.
This is a great idea.
Absolutely. You got to try
thank
that.
you.
We got to try this.
I'm very excited to
Leaving
try
these
this.
with you.
Thank you so much. I'm
Thank
very
you
excited
so
to try
much.
it. Be
Thank
sure to
you,
check out
Martha.
Storied_goods on Instagram or storied-goods.com.
Storied-goods.
Storied-goods.
It's very complicated.
Storied-goods.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank
Martha.
you.
Thank you, Martha.
Pleasure.
This has been
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Wow.
So as we do our little swap-a-roo
Absolutely.
to Tom here, thank you, Miguel Corradi, for watching the show today. He says, buongiorno, excellent show, great team today, Mañana.
Buongiorno. That sounds very Italian.
I know, he's doing us a little
That's
Italian this
Italian.
morning. Miguel, he knows,
That's right.
he knows I'm half Italian, so he's doing me a little buongiorno. Buongiorno, Miguel, amigo del programa.
Buenos días, as they say.
Buenos días, como se dice en español.
En español.
En
Con
español.
azúcar.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Martha.
Martha. And we're really excited to do a little swap-a-roo here from one great guest to another.
Absolutely.
We're going to welcome to the show Tom Chapman. He is the executive director of the Albemarle Charlottesville. Another little tongue twister there. Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society. Tom, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Tom.
Thank you very much. It took me a couple months to figure out the tongue twister too. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm curious. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be connected with the Historical Society.
Well, I've been involved in museums and nonprofits, historic sites. Worked at James Madison's Montpelier for many years, which is probably a whole other story we won't want to get into right now if you've seen everything in the news. But with that experience, I was tapped to come in and help the Historical Society here in Charlottesville kind of dig itself out of where it was. And so I've been in the position since April 1st of 2020.
Okay.
So that was like,
Great timing.
What a time to get a new job.
Exactly, yeah. A couple weeks after COVID, and I'm not sure April 1st if I was the fool or somebody else was, but we've had a great 2 years kind of rebuilding and reinventing the Historical Society, so it's been great to be involved.
That's fantastic. One thing, the question I have, because I know it can differ from place to place, and people often think of museums and such. How would you describe to those who are not familiar, what is a historical society?
Public history. It's basically bringing local history to the local community. It's the Historical Society here in Charlottesville it was called the Albemarle County Historical Society, and then in the early 2000s they changed their name to Albemarle Charlottesville to reflect that they were pulling from both of those communities, both county and city. But as for its 80-year history, it's basically collect, preserve, and interpret local history. So the interest there in that mission, that core mission, has never really changed. It's just a matter of kind of looking at, how society changes, how culture changes, how we look at ourselves in our past and tell different stories and make sure that all of those stories are being told and brought to the forefront.
There's always so much more to learn. We had recently, a couple months ago, we had on Sarah Bonharbour from James Monroe's Ash Lawn
Right,
Island,
right.
Yeah,
just
Island.
talking about this information, this knowledge about the house that was lost for 100 years, and you then say there can't possibly be new history. James Monroe, he's been around, but sure enough, if you dig deep enough there's always something new to learn and interpret.
Oh, yeah, I know Sarah for many years as her archaeology background, and I have an archaeology background too. So when they uncovered the fact that the Monroe house was not actually in existence, it was like, okay, what do we do with our historic site?
Yeah.
But I think it opens up a lot of opportunities. And we've actually been working very closely with the descendant community, the Monroe family descendant community.
Interesting.
Our research librarian at the Historical Society, Miranda Burnett, has done a lot of work on many of the enslaved community that were sold to Florida by Monroe. So we've been working, and this has all been with COVID, so it's kind of put a damper on it, but we've been working to try to help them put together a road trip of bringing the community up here in Virginia down to the Florida community and kind of having like a bus bring everyone down and have kind of a reunion of sorts. So.
Interesting, just to sort of follow that trail of history.
But how our local history here in Charlottesville, kind of the breadbasket, if you will, of the nation in terms of presidents and ideas and many things that's come from here, and how that interconnects with the larger nation. I mean, but, how it all starts on a local level, like local history. It's like, I can't remember, was it Tip O'Neill said all politics is local? It's
local.
like the sense of all history is
It's
local.
local.
If you understand your local history, you can really tie into larger stories that are going on around you.
I've always found that very interesting about history when you start thinking about the fact that history, although it's historical, it's old, right? It can continue to evolve and change and sometimes rediscover. I mean, that show that we were watching, I was watching with Mom. You talk about archaeology. I mean, they keep digging. This was in Jerusalem, right? They keep digging and they find things, and it's like this is pre, AD. So you find things and you say, it gives you now all of a sudden a story. I mean, they found pieces so you can kind of get a feel for the ships and the Galilee Sea during Jesus' time, right? So it's like they find all these pieces, they put it together. So now there's another
story that you didn't
right?
know before.
Exactly,
Yep.
and I think that's the beauty about history. You keep looking and searching and researching, and you find new stories, and that's the beauty.
Yeah, I mean, one of our ideas that we push out is that history is not the past, it's the stories we tell about the past.
It's true.
And how we tell those stories reflects the different, places we are. So if you look at a story about the local community written 40 years ago, there's going to be a different perspective to it than what we write now.
Of course.
And it's not necessarily, revisionism in the sense that we're changing history. It's, every group, every culture, every community needs to look at themselves and look at their past and kind of understand, what they said in the past. Did it make sense for us now? There's a lot of that going on in Charlottesville over the past, 5 or so years.
Of course.
With many different things.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
we're trying to be in a place where we, have the collections, we can make the connections and partnerships with other groups and say, everyone has a story to tell. And we're open to having, a voice and facilitating that story to get it out there. So,
Absolutely.
it's been the silver lining of COVID in a way,
There you
because
go.
we've done, 40 plus online programs
Wow.
since October of 21. The first program we did was actually with a lady, Adine Cayley, and Dr. Mike Dickens on the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic and its impact locally.
Okay.
So it was
Interesting.
an interesting
I mean, time
comparison,
really.
like 20-year difference or 100-year difference between what we're dealing with COVID and what happened in the past. And when you look at it, there's so many similarities and so many different things that, if we knew our history better, we might have learned something for what we're dealing with now. But
Absolutely. So I'm curious, what are some of the programs that people can find at the Charlottesville, the Historical Society?
Well, yeah, right now, everything has been online. We have a YouTube channel that you can find that we've tried to have all of our programs saved to, also on our Facebook page. You can find all the programs there. And also on Facebook, and you can find our calendar, like events that are coming up.
Okay.
So let's see, what do we have? May 26th, we're going to have a Memorial Day program. We were contacted by a group called Fields of Honor, They represent, or a nonprofit that focuses on trying to expand the history of individuals buried in World War II cemeteries throughout Europe.
Interesting.
So they contacted us because this gentleman who had was killed in action was born in Charlottesville. So they're like, do you know this person's name? So our research librarian was able to kind of track down some things. He went to Lane High School, but we couldn't tell in a group picture which one he was. And then we found, I think it was his son or maybe a nephew who was still living in North Carolina and made that connection. So we're going to be interviewing some folks there who represent the Field of Honor. So it's kind of our international Zoom, looking at Memorial Day. And let's see, we have the Brand exhibit where we're partnering with the Center at Belvedere. So Frances Brand was a local artist who did the collection of firsts. There's over 150 paintings she did in the late 1970s of local community members who she felt were the first to do something in the local community.
Wow.
So we're going to take a selection of those and put them on display at the Belvedere, the center at the Belvedere, and then also do some work with CVillepedia and other means of getting information out there about this important collection. It's she was somewhat of an eccentric painter. She would take portraits that you could buy at like Kmart or the local dollar store, and then paint over them. Her own. So you wouldn't call it high art, but it's probably folk art, but it's a great reflection of local community history.
That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah, just what an interesting way to do it.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, so that's July 1st through August 31st over at the Center at Belvedere.
The Center of Belvedere. So there's both online exhibits as well as online programs, I should say, as well as some exhibits that people can sort of see in person.
We're starting to dabble in the in-person, trying to figure out that muscle memory of, 2 years under COVID, like, okay, how did we do this? And for me, I started April 1st, so it was like, I had no idea what was done before COVID. So everything's been a new thing. Where we're located, we're in the 1921 Old Public Library downtown. So it's right next to the Central Library off of Market Street Park. And we have exhibits that we're opening up. We're actually working with a group from the Renaissance School, some students, and a teacher's class there, Sally Duncan. And they are going to be over the next couple weeks. They've been working on this as a semester project, taking items from our collection, doing the research on it, and then interpreting them through a youthful eye. So we're excited because the teacher's been like, okay, what are the parameters? What do you want us to do? It's like, we want the kids to tell this story. Take the object, put it in the display case, write the text up, put the panel together, make it happen. So it'll be interesting, exciting to see.
That should be interesting, very fun, yeah.
So probably first week in June that'll be up, and we'll have that kind of ongoing. We'll have it on display for the next few months at least, if not through the end of the year. So
there's other exhibits that are currently at the location, at the building?
Right now, no. We've taken everything out. So we do have a research library that is heavily used by the local community, people coming by all the time to understand, I get emails all the time, like trying to, can you help me with this? And it's like, pass that on to the research librarian. She knows more than I do. And we also do historic tours. So we've been doing tours of Court Square downtown, and then also special theme tours. We've been partnering with the Common House and working with the Historic Resource Committee of the city to kind of help with some tour program stuff. So, we're trying to get a lot of different things, at least with COVID, being outdoor doing a tour was one thing.
Makes perfect sense.
With the Center at Belvedere, that's going to be one of our first main, like, in-person, in-house, in a classroom or in an exhibit hall kind of thing. So looking forward to that.
Same here. That should be.
That's a great idea about the tours, right? Because when people come to Charlottesville, right, and obviously a lot of people like to go to Monticello, et cetera, but to be able to, if you have the opportunity to then just take local tours here, that's something maybe to think about, areas where people wouldn't think about going, but that have history. That's fantastic,
Yeah, we've actually seen, besides some of our pop-up or specific theme tours that we put out there locally and local community members jump in, a lot of the folks that are calling us to book tours are tourists. out-of-town folks.
Yeah.
They're like, I've seen Charlottesville on the news and we want to come visit. And
Exactly.
we want to do something off the beaten path.
Yeah.
We don't want to do the regular thing.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's been great to connect with folks like that.
Especially because I think it gives you a sense beyond the famous people, those big names that lived in Charlottesville. How did like the average person live? Like would the person living in Charlottesville have walked? What are some of the buildings that were like in the town? Because if you just hit the big sites, yes, you'll learn about life on Jefferson's plantation, but you won't learn about what it was like to live in the town of Charlottesville at the time. You have to go a little deeper off the beaten path, take one of these tours to sort of get more of a sense of, okay, if you take out the big names as important as they were to American history, what about the average person that would have lived and worked and died here?
Exactly. And that's much local history. I mean, that's the sense of, you can tell the big name stories, you can connect with the larger national themes, Declaration of Independence and the Constitution at Montpelier and, all these big things. But at the core of it, in many ways, what both of these plantation historic sites have been working on for many, many years is the realization that they represent a larger part of the history. That, there's a larger story there to say the person who wrote the Declaration of Independence owned 300 plus slaves. Okay, what does that mean for us now? And looking at Charlottesville and our history recently and Unite the Right 2017 and the impact that's had on our community, it's really, we need to grapple with the sense that there's a deeper history here that has not been told.
And so many stories of things that they
so many.
did and the way that they lived and the achievements that they had within the confines of that time.
Yeah, you look at downtown Charlottesville. In the early 19th century, there was a large number of African American, freed blacks who were landowners and very successful business people.
Right.
Intermarriages or kind of understood sort of intermarriages at that time because it wasn't legal between white and black individuals that made up a lot of part of like what was downtown Charlottesville. Those stories are there if you search them out, but they're not regularly connected to. And one thing we've also been working on very closely with the city of Charlottesville is some work over at Penn Park, which has been pretty exciting because there was a discovery, there was an understanding that there were unmarked burials outside of the cemetery walls of the family who owned the Penn Park, the Gilmer, the Cravens, and then later the Hotops. But over the past year, we've understood more about the total number of unmarked burials there, that they're very likely, 99.9% certain that they're related to the enslaved community that worked and labored on that property.
Interesting.
And working with the city and working with the Central Virginia history researchers and other local folks, uncovering who could be buried there and making some very interesting connections with the descendant community. There was one descendant group, the Waller family, who have had their reunions at Penn Park for years. And then we contacted them through Jeff Werner with the city because he happened to work with this other gentleman who used to be in Charlottesville. He's now up in Loudoun County or Fairfax, I think. He said, we're finding this connection. We came up with this name. And he looks at that and he gets back to Jeff by email. It's like, that's my great-grandfather. So we did a research to get from 1804 up to basically 1950 and then made a connection for their family that takes it, all the way to the present. Where they only knew, Papa.
They only knew the 1950.
Yeah, it was like Papa Gilmer, never really talked about his past. So that history and their oral tradition wasn't there. So we made that connection there, and all of a sudden it was like, well, we used to have our reunions at Penn Park. It was like, I think the spirits are talking to you.
Now we know why.
There's something there. So, that's very important because, this is an important part of that story. You look at Gilmer or Craven or Hotop as names, as you said, in the local community. Those are the big names that are in the history books. But then you look at the enslaved community that was there who made them possible, made that history possible. Telling those stories now is so important within our local community. Yeah. And to put the descendants in a place where their voice is heard and their stories are heard is even more important. So that's what we at the Historical Society are trying to do, and it's through partnerships and working with folks to make that happen.
That's amazing.
Well, no, I was going to say, I also noticed, you provided us with a newsletter, which is called Bulletin. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how often this comes out and how people can, get a hands on this, because it's great history.
Yeah, well, we're trying to, with this newsletter, get it out a little more frequently. With COVID and some financial constraints and other things we've been working over the past 2 years. At least once or twice, we'll probably be able to get like a actual printed, mailed, cover the postage, get it out there. But we're also doing online through emails, so kind of a newsletter through email bulletin. So that you can go to our website and you can sign up to join our email list, or you can go to our membership or our donation page, and if you join as a member or make a donation, then you end up on our emailing list also.
Absolutely.
And but yeah, no, it's a great means by which we can connect to the community. We've seen recently with COVID, with everything online, you think of Historical Society membership, it's, maybe a certain picture comes to mind of senior, retired, but working with them through this process of being more online, it's been interesting to see how many people are connecting online where they weren't before. And it's a lot of the senior retired community who have felt, kind of isolated because of COVID, because of health issues. They didn't want to get out.
So they can sort of feel connected again and involved.
And that's one thing that we're looking at now in terms of that muscle memory, like I said, of going from online to in person. There's always going to probably be a hybrid, because there's so many people that we have connected with over the past 2 years online that we never would have connected with if we were just in person. They wouldn't know where we were. They wouldn't come by our property. They're 3 counties over, or maybe they're like in Wyoming. Who knows? So we're not aiming for a national crowd, but people who have connections locally who want to
who may not live here anymore, but are
learn
still
more.
tied to it.
Exactly. So it's it's exciting to be able to put these newsletters out and connect with people.
Absolutely. And so before we let you know, where can people find the society, get this, get the bulletin, get the e-newsletter?
We are, our website is www.albemarlehistory.org. And you can also find us on Facebook, which is ACHISTSOC, AC Hissock, which is our little, and that's also our Twitter handle. So if you're into Twitter, you can get us there. And unlike the lady before who loves Instagram, I'm a historical society. I haven't gotten into this. My daughter and my wife and everyone's like, why don't you have your Instagram? It's like, I got so many other social media things going on here.
There we go.
Yeah, that's the best way to connect with us. You can find all of our emails on the website. For tours, you can email programs at albemarlehistory.org. And
maybe become a member, which is important.
Become a member and support local history.
Absolutely.
So it's our history is your history. So we're here as a community service.
Exactly.
We're a nonprofit, private, nonprofit, but we're basically beholden to the local community to say, local history is important, and we want to tell that story.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah.
Absolutely. So be sure to check out albemarlehistory.org. And if you can't remember the Hissock, if you type in Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society on Facebook, it will be the first thing that pops up. So you've got it right there. Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tom. It's been wonderful. Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're doing great work.
Well, I appreciate it. It's the work of the local community that I'm trying to do. So it's not mine, it's the historical societies.
We appreciate it. We appreciate the society. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you again.
Appreciate it.
All righty. So as we go ahead and swap to our last finance segment.
Finance segment.
Yeah.
Oy. Talk about history.
I know.
Local history.
Couple thank yous. Connie Draft, thanks for watching the show this morning. Leonton Clay Pett, thanks for watching the show this morning. So, I know it's funny, we talk about history and in finance too, there's so much that goes into knowing the past, what has happened before in terms of inflation, things that have cropped up recently that we haven't had to deal with for a while.
That's right.
Inflation is certainly something that for the last 20 years is rather new.
40 years.
40. Well, there was a little bit, the early 2000s, you might have had a little bit. You know what I mean? But really, it's true. Inflation of this level, we haven't seen in 40 years.
That's right.
So to be able to deal with that and talk to people who lived through that inflation of that era and who say, well, yeah, this is what it's like. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, it's the thing about financial history is that although some of the events are similar, right? What causes of the events are not,
Changes.
right? And there are changes. So you can't just go back and say, okay, what happened in the 70s? What can we do? What did they do back in the 70s in order to squash inflation and get back, right, to a more normalized inflationary environment? Which, you know me, I've always said, I don't understand the concept of inflationary environment. Why can't we just have zero inflation? What's wrong with that? I just don't understand, but I guess...
Why do we intentionally target
But I guess if
prices
you're
going
government
up?
and you owe a lot of money, you really want that money to be a little cheaper in the future. But I guess the reason I just wanted to touch upon it, and I mean, it is what it is in the sense that we are seeing the numbers. People are experiencing for the first time in a very, very long time a sense that they go to the store and a week later, eggs are already 50 cents more expensive than they were last week, right? Milk is more expensive. Food's all types of foods are expensive. And you sit there and you go, you have a situation where and you've talked about this many times, especially with Jerry, the concept of inflation, you can have, like we had at the end of I think it was last month, an 8.5% inflation. You say, wow, I mean, that is huge, right? I mean, it's the highest we've had in history. And so then we get 8.3 this time. You go, okay, so it's going lower, right? The issue that I say is that you have to consider something, right? So in other words, think about it. Inflation is measured based on an index. So if let's say you start the index at 100, and you got that 8.5 raise. So that means
Now you're at
basically a 108.5. So if you have an 8.3 increase on that index, it's an 8.3 index on a 108.5, right? So that's huge. If you go back to 100 and say what that would have been, it's still extremely high. It's more than 8.3. So what I try to explain to people is that the concept, what we need to look at is at what point is inflation going to stabilize? Because if it keeps going at this pace, it becomes more and more detrimental to families, right, the working people, because their pocketbook is not growing anywhere close to that rate.
That's the issue. I think there's a tendency to not realize that the inflation rate is the change in the price level.
That's correct.
Right, so 8.5 to 8.3 does not mean that prices went down. It means that prices that had already gone up 8.5 went up, in this case, it's the annual rate. They didn't go up another 8.3, but in other words, they were still up 8.3 from this same time last year.
That's right.
So in other words, the price level keeps going up. The only way the price level stabilizes is if you hit zero. In other words, if inflation, if you get a 0% inflation rate, that means that the high prices that we're seeing now are here to stay.
That's right.
They're not going any higher,
That's right.
but they're
and
here
they're not
to
going
stay.
down either.
And as we've said before, they very rarely go down.
Yeah.
It's very rare that you see deflation, which is a decrease in prices, right? So it is a challenging time, but as you sit there and say, yes, is 8.3 better than seeing 8.5 again? Yes. But your price level is still higher than it was this time last year on a month by month, moving scale. And, I mean, we're seeing the same thing with producer price index today. PPI today was at 11%, right? Which is better than last month's 11.2, but that still portends that before goods even get to you in the store, the people making those goods are still seeing higher prices than they were a year ago.
That's right. So and I know that basically is going to translate to continued, high inflation numbers over the next couple of months, right? And certainly we're sitting at 8% inflation, right? And you're sitting at a level of interest rates which is, was as close to zero as you can. I think it was 0.25, right?
And now,
and of course now
slightly
we've raised it, so it's 1%. But the expectation that the Federal Reserve will literally increase rates so quickly, so high, in order to squash an 8.3 inflation is almost impossible, right? I mean, it's just, first of all, if they did that, think about the bond market as we know it today, that bond market would be catastrophic, free fall, yeah,
Free fall.
with respect to
The bond market would be free
the
fall.
prices of those bonds.
The interest on the debt of the United States government would balloon.
Oh, in
to
addition, yeah,
It's already, what is it, 9% of the budget?
yes,
You have to imagine that thing more than doubles.
yeah.
If,
But it's 9% of the budget with an average interest rate of 0.5%.
exactly. So in other words, if that debt becomes a 10% interest rate, that thing probably would quadruples.
Yeah, I mean, everything that we'd be paying for would be the interest on our debt. So there'd be no other services we could pay for.
Exactly. So you sit there and say it's probably not going to
Yes,
happen.
exactly. And second of all, we also know that, again, the inflation rate that we're seeing today is caused by, in some cases, events that can be, to a certain respect, fixed. And so whether or not the
Supply chain
gets fixed and gas prices get fixed and oil prices gets fixed, it really is up to a certain respect, the people in charge, right? Because some things can be fixed.
Some things,
right?
yeah. Some things.
can be-
The inflation, the higher level of price of goods that we're facing probably will not go down. However, because we've talked about this before, that CPI, once that higher level of price is attained, you don't see a decrease in the overall price level. However, individual goods and services can see decreases. So in other words, gas, we see it all the time, right?
Sure.
Gas prices can go up, they can also go down. So it's not as though once gas hits $4 a gallon, it stays at $4 a gallon forever. So if gas prices can come down, that can alleviate, and if diesel prices especially, which have been rising, can come down, that can alleviate the inflation rate that we see. Doesn't mean that suddenly everything across the board is going to go down in price, but it does mean that you won't see the increases that we're seeing now, which is really the more detrimental part. In other words, if inflation tomorrow hit 0%, yes, would everything be more expensive than it was a year ago? Yes, it would. But wages would catch up to that, and at that point, everything's more expensive, but you're also making more. It's the fact that wages cannot catch up to inflation that really puts strain on people. Because if I told you everything you're going to buy is 10% more expensive, but you will make 10% more money, you'd sit there and say, all right, it's not great, but I'm in the exact same boat I was a year ago.
That's correct, yes.
The pain comes in when your wages cannot keep pace. Because you sit there and say, yes, you paid me 5% more. I'm making 5% more than I did a year ago, but everything is 15% more expensive. So now I'm worse off than I was.
And what happens during
ago.
that time period? I mean, if you continue to have that type of rise in the prices of things that you purchase, but your wages don't keep up, you begin to buy less.
At some point, you have no choice. I mean, by definition, right, as hard as it may be, you end up buying less.
Yes.
You force yourself
Which means
to
that
buy less.
as you buy less,
Economy slows down.
companies slow down, and things look even worse.
Which,
right?
I mean, I did want to bring this up because I know we had talked a little bit about this. We didn't have time 2 weeks ago on Today Mañana to sort of touch on this a little bit, but I brought it up on Jerry's show on Tuesday on I Love CVille. The recent GDP number was negative.
Right.
However, you were not quite as bearish about this as you could have been, in other words, because of certain deeper. Did you take this sort of into that? So I think there was a fear that number, the negative GDP, meant that people had suddenly stopped spending across the board, and that really was not exactly the case.
Right. So basically, when you dig deep into that GDP number, what you realize is that from a perspective of us as a domestic, right, the GDP was growing. What happened was that what we were importing, right, a lot more than we were exporting by a tremendous amount, right? Mm-hmm. Which of course doesn't bode well for us, right? But the fact that the U.S. appears to be the one economy, Europe is in worse shape than we are, for example. Mm-hmm. The rest of the world is also going into, in some cases, a very slowdown in their economies. So what happens is the U.S. is the one that seems to have come out of this, and the economy starting to move, and so we needed to import a lot in order to rebuild inventory. Mm-hmm. So because of the fact that we imported so much but didn't export, right, that is a drag on our GDP.
Subtracted from.
That's right. We subtract from whatever we did.
Because GDP, I mean, it is a made-up. It's important to remember that it is kind of a made-up number. In other words, it's a number that tries to calculate all the goods and services being made in the United States. So by definition, you have to take out of that number a good. So if I go and buy a papaya, and the papaya was made in Mexico, right? Or was grown, I should say. It wasn't made, but like it was grown in Mexico, right? Even though I ate the papaya here in the United States and I bought it here, we didn't produce it in the United
That's
States.
correct.
So the person who gets the credit for producing the papaya should be Mexico. So that papaya, since it was imported, is subtracted from the economy of the United States. So it doesn't, in other words, those kind of subtractions can take out of the GDP number, even if it doesn't necessarily mean that your economy is slowing down. In other words,
Correct.
if we tomorrow suddenly started making more things in the United States and not buying them from other countries, our GDP would spike, even if we were consuming the same level of stuff. If I said tomorrow we will no longer buy any papayas from Mexico and we'll grow them all here, we would be eating the same number of papayas.
Right.
But our GDP would look like it had a sudden
would look a lot
boost
better.
because
That's
the
right.
papayas are being made in the United States and not in Mexico. So there's a lot that goes into that number that can sometimes lead us to panic, even though in this particular case, we weren't really seeing a slowdown in consumer spending, rather just the fact that for this quarter, we happened to buy a lot of things from other countries, which means they get the credit for making them.
I mean,
and we didn't sell that much to them.
We did see a slowdown in government spending. We saw a slowdown in corporate spending, which, you have to scratch your head and say, especially on the corporate side, are we going to continue to see that? I mean, that will be, obviously.
That's a little more concerning because, government spending had skyrocketed so much
Of course,
because of COVID funding,
right.
That to not see a decrease in government spending would have been itself a bad thing because you would have said, wait a second,
Absolutely.
you spent $4 trillion out of thin air and you spent more. So, you want to see that decrease.
No,
It's a sort of
no
a
doubt about it.
normalization.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
The corporate spending,
Yeah.
the corporate investment is where you worry because typically businesses, if you think about it, a small business does the same thing, right? You invest in your small business when you think that the future profit is there. In other words, people will buy
Well, and you have to
more
expand,
things,
for example.
you're expanding
right? That's right,
and so
yeah.
forth. If you're not investing or you cease to invest in your small business, it means either, no, but I don't think more people are buying my product and the future looks a little worrisome to me.
That's right.
So you don't want businesses, whether large or small, looking at the future and saying, this doesn't
not
look
looking
so
good.
good.
Yeah.
I better hold on to my money because that's not a healthy sign.
No, it's not a healthy sign at all. And, it's early to try to figure this out, but the challenges that we have is, as you know, the consumer is 70% of our economy. So the consumer is where we really have to keep an eye on and say, what are they doing? Interest rates are going up, mortgage rates are going up, house prices are going up. So all that eats up into consumers, pocketbook, right? Discretionary spending. So you sit there and you go, are they going to have anything left, to buy other product?
The durable goods,
and the beautiful thing is, when you buy a house, everybody knows this, you buy a house, the amount you spend now is greater because, now all of a sudden you have a house, it's a bigger house, you got to buy some furniture, you have to buy more appliances, whatever it may be, right? You are now spending, right? But if the consumer has basically reached his limit and saying, yes, I can afford the house, but I cannot furnish those 3 rooms, you're going to feel it. The economy's going to feel it. So, how long this inflation rate lasts is going to be critical, really critical to see, whether or not we're going to go into at least a recession.
Absolutely. So, as we've said before, the best way for people to prepare for this is just to take a look at your portfolio, don't panic,
Yeah.
be defensive.
Well, we always talk about the fact, you look at the numbers that we've looked at over the last 20 years, right? And when you see that the top 5, 6, 7 days of the stock market are essentially, right, the most important part, what impacts the most, the long-term return of your portfolio, right? You can't just say, let me sell, and then 2 weeks later you get that pop that nobody expected and you missed it. And now you sold and you thought you were doing the right thing, and then all of a sudden the pop comes and you're not participating. So we always tell,
It's
first
time
of all,
in the market.
Yeah, it's time in the market. That's right, not timing the market. But more importantly, and I tell this to everybody I meet, it's not about just, here's money, invest it for me. It's, what are your goals? What are your expectations? What are you trying to achieve? that tells us exactly how much risk one needs to take in the market to get to where you want to be, right? Some retired people is like, I just need this amount of income on a monthly basis because that's what I need to supplement my pension or my Social Security. So that portfolio will be many times a lot less risky. So whether or not it's going up or down, if the income is the same, right, knowing to make it better because interest rate going up, then the market value of that fund isn't as critical because the income is what you were needing, right?
So really, it's talking with your financial advisor to make sure you're in. If you need income, are you in a portfolio that generates income? If you need growth, are you in a portfolio that generates growth? And can you be calm about it during this time?
Yeah. And it's us reaching out too. I mean, obviously, financial advisors, I'm sure, reach out to their clients and say,
just like we're doing,
don't
Emergent.
panic, because panicking is the worst thing you can do, right? You just have to be calm, recognize that, listen, we had a down market in 2020, for 1 month, the market was down 35, 36%. Yes, I mean, tech has been hammered in here for good reason. I mean, tech is a long-term play. So you have a long-term play, which is basically a long-duration expectation. Long-duration assets, when interest rates go up, suffer the most, right? It's all mathematics, right? So that's the expectation. When you have things like Costco, when you have things like, Johnson & Johnson, these are the companies that, they're not long-term plays, they're value companies generating income today, right? That income being generated today is worth a lot more than the expectation of another company generating income in the future. So that's what's going on. It's a balance, it's mathematics right now, and it's like, if interest rates are going up, I want to avoid future income, I want current income, right? So as long as your portfolio is generating some current income, and I always highly recommend that you have a diversified portfolio because current income provides two major things. One is it provides income, especially if you're retired and you need income. And second of all, it creates the opportunity to reinvest. So when you see something that is down 50, 60% and you say, this company's great. I mean, remember Amazon and Apple during the financial crisis, I mean, they went down to $2. If you kept Apple or bought Apple back then, you did extremely well. So it's the same thing today. So if you can generate some cash out of your portfolio, reinvest in those assets that are really, really been hammered, but the company is solid, it's a great opportunity to buy. But if you don't have that cash, there's nothing you can do. Yeah.
So there's our recommendation for the day.
There you are. Income is, always say that, income is king.
It's key.
Yeah.
This was such a fantastic show, really. And
it was.
Really
Thank you again.
it.
You make this show possible, and in the sense that you keep it going and
bring the
smile.
enthusiasm, the questions. Love it.
Well, the sugar. I mean, anytime that.
Anytime you have the sugar, right, you get a little boost there.
Sugar rush. Just thinking about it gave me a sugar rush.
Thinking about it gave me a sugar rush. And just really appreciate always being here with you. Next week's going to be fantastic as well. We're going to have on Amanda Welch. She's the owner of Grubby Girl Soaps from here in local business. A fun little name there. And as well as Jeff Camrath from Aqua CVille.
Jeff, yes. Well known.
It's always fun talking
Absolutely.
with him. He's just a wealth of knowledge about entrepreneurship, small business, UVA baseball. We'll do a little UVA baseball in there. So just looking forward to that. Just really appreciate being here on the I Love CVille Network set. As always, we're presented by Emergent Financial Services. We are powered by Vitae Spirits, by Sirius Craddock Insurance, by Aqua CVille Hand Car Wash, by GBS Financial Services, and by Castle Hill Cider. Be sure to check out 231 Fest this Sunday at noon. It's going to be a beautiful time. Did want to share actually the prices for that. The ticket prices have gone down thanks to an anonymous donor.
Wow,
so you can actually get in for less than you would have thought. So be sure to check that out.
It's 50 now instead of 62.
There we go, $50 instead of $62 for the ticket. And that includes some tastings. That includes the live music. That includes the entry to be able to get some of the food, the local vendors. So it's a steal. So thanks to an anonymous donor there, it's $50 a person instead of. So that's a 20% drop in the ticket price there. So be sure to check that out at Castle Hill Cider. And I'll just double check this here. I believe it's castlehillcider.com/231. /231. Literally the numbers 231, and it will take you right there.
All right.
So be sure to check it out. just always partnering here with Forward Adelante, the premier Latino networking group here in Charlottesville. Just thank you so much for being my co-host as always.
Thank you.
Thank you so much everyone for your comments today, for watching the show. Thank you Lorenzo Dickerson for watching the show this morning as well. Just really appreciate your participation, your viewership. Be sure to let us know if any small business owners you want us to bring on. Send the comments, questions our way, and we look forward to seeing you all next Thursday. But until that time, hasta mañana.